Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, I want to ramble on for a bit about updates to the build collection as they have happened in the last few weeks with the changes of the new season. Not much has changed, that's also why we're not doing a super in-depth one as we did with last season, where we actually went character by character and went through all of their build loadouts and kind of explained what they were for, how hard they were to get. That was a one-time thing, honestly, because we're not going to repeat that every season, of course, mostly because the builds that haven't changed. And this season, unlike last season where we had weapon changes and basically every build got touched, here only a few builds got touched. We'll touch on some of them. I added, of course, a few refactors in there as it is actually a pretty good gear set and is usable. It isn't definitely, I wouldn't say, a new meta or anything, but it's definitely usable, and in the right seasons with the right modifiers, I could see a good place for them. So we have them at the ready. Then as well, of course, a few builds got changed here and there. I also removed a few builds to make space for the refactors, and then also we just changed up some builds just because we wanted to try out new things. So we'll go over all that, including some actually this time conflict and DZ builds, as I've started making a folder and also just having a few of those in my collection. But yeah, let's go first introduce the collection. Then as well, everything will be timestamped down below so you can jump around and see if you just want to see a certain piece or a certain build style. You can go for that. Also, towards the end of the video, I have actually made a pretty good looking spreadsheet for tracking your skill mods and how you have them, basically. Especially for people like me, where we have 4 characters, it is kind of handy actually to kind of keep track of them in that way. And I've been meaning to for forever, and then actually, yeah, I took the time in the last few days to put together one that I'm actually pretty proud of, and it turned out pretty okay. So that'll be the end there of this video. But let's go get started by first introducing the build collection. And to introduce the build collection, for those that may not know it, it is a folder, a Google folder. It contains basically all of my first and second accounts loadout slots on active characters, basically. And the link will be, of course, down below, so you can go there yourself. One of the handy things as well, as a tip, as usually it shows up as a list starting out, because that's just how Google Drive is set up, unless you have it set as your preferences that it's different. You can always hit this grid view, because a lot of people ask me how I actually see it like this, and that is that. Also, dark mode is on here, which helps a little bit with not having too much eye strain from it. If you do put it into grid view here, like here, and then also I'm sorting it by name, because you can also sort it by date modified, which has some value if you want to see which files I've been messing around in. You can sort them by modified, and you can see which ones have recently been touched on. But quite often that is just me fixing a mistake, not per se making a new build or anything. Then, yeah, what we have is the folders at the very top, tippity top there. Then we have an about me and a recommended file. In the recommended file as well, this is actually, if you're starting out, I would actually recommend starting here, as this is curated list basically from the collection, where also there's a little bit of explanation, as for instance, we start out with some strikers and explain that is the current meta, and then some of the other reds that work decently well enough to recommend, because not every build in the build collection is a recommended build. Some are just silly stuff. And then we go on to just a ton of other builds that are effective and have their uses, things like Oxy, things like Foam Eclipse, Fire Eclipse, Tech Tanks, a dozen or so Headhunters in pistol and shotgun and rifle modes, and explosive builds, and a bunch of other stuff, and protection from lead, and combat medic, and half healers. Yeah, there's a lot of actually build variety in the division, and I feel this kind of showcases that pretty well. Then it goes basically into the numbered drawings, Google Drawings, as that's what I basically use for these. And the way that they're numbered as well, just to reiterate that, is that the number before the dot, basically, that, for instance, there's 1.01, character 1 on account 1 is 1, and then the 0.1 is the 0.01 is their loadout slot. So this is loadout slot 1 on character 1, and it then goes to up to 16. We have 16 loadout slots. Then it goes to character 2.01 all the way up to 2.16, and then to 3. And the reason there is 5 in here is I have 2 accounts. On the main account, I have 4 characters. On the second account, I only have 1 main character, kind of. The rest are hardcores and watch alts and such. But on main account, I have all 4 character slots filled in, and that's the main bulk of the build collection as well. That's also why 50 or 5 dot onward is quite a bit of repeats or just variants on builds that are already in the collection. As on that account, I basically just take the builds that I kind of enjoy having or kind of feel I need to have for certain challenges or for certain things. And we're basically, I'm showing them there usually as a different variant, just changing up a chest talent or something, and showing them like that. Also to have both variants in there. Then as well, there's these folders up here, which are recommended folders. So for instance, in the Striker recommended is a bunch of versions of Striker, and all of them are recommended. Now as well, as we talked about earlier, there's now a Conflict Dark Zone one. This is a new edition of this season. It isn't actually as filled in as I want it to be yet, but we'll keep adding to it as we go along. Because I definitely have more than that one as well, just to put in there, and then the other ones are there as well. So you can kind of either peruse it just to get some ideas, because there are some weirder stuff in here that are definitely not in the recommended list, like purple builds. Well, I should know, the purple builds are technically in the recommended, but they're at the bottom as like, hey, if you've done everything in the game, go make one of these. But yeah, some of the weirder stuff, like let's say, and as I'm trying to find the Red Eclipse here, those are not per se recommended, and because of that as well, they don't show up in the recommended build list as, oh, I'm looking at the wrong character there, that's why I can't find it. But yeah, you have stuff like this, which is just barely working, and because of that, it's not going to show up there. So start off in the recommended list, I would say, but you can take to the whole collection as and if you need some inspiration. But yeah, let's go get started actually with a trio of refactors and how they came in and what they look like. And going into it with that trio of refactors, and it's been a while actually that a build has come, or a gear set has come in, and I've made multiple builds out of it in the build collection. The last time that I can think of one is actually Umbra, I think. As since then, usually just I've messed around with the gear set of the season, definitely, but usually in basically one slot, just there's one kind of like, I'm going to do it like this, and we just have one of them in there. In the case of Refactor, though, a trio has come in. So I have here an as 3.04, and of course all of these will be linked down below directly as well. A general turret drone setup, which can also kind of double as a mortar setup, as we'll talk about in a second. Then as well, I went with a status effecty kind of setup where we're trying to do, in effect, kind of, it's layout-wise, it's similar to a foam eclipse, but then going for damage with a fire cam in this case. And I've been quite enjoying this one as well. And then as well, I wanted to make something akin to Red FI, kind of. And then instead of having the buff plus damage, having healing plus damage, kind of combat medic style. This has also actually taken over the combat medic on this character on 1.09. The other one in between was 2.06, but of course all of them will be linked down below. Let's actually zoom in onto this 3.04, which is just a general turret drone setup. And here we're going with 4 pieces of Refactor together with the Force Multiplier with that Perfect Combined Arms, and then a second piece of Hana Yu together with Kinetic Momentum. The biggest downside of Refactor versus a normal turret drone setup, so if we were going just 3-piece Empress, 2-piece Hana Yu, piece of Wyvern, there you get to have a few more minor attributes. As damage-wise, these two are pretty close to each other. It's basically a difference of 5 skill damage, as we kind of showed in visualizing stats, as we do get to keep the chest and backpack, as we don't need to have those be per se Refactor. And I'm also actually quite often not choosing to use the chest of Refactor, as the Refactor chest, while pretty useful, in most cases is actually way too much healing, more healing than you would really need. It could make sense maybe for legendary or such, but honestly I feel doing more damage makes quite a bit of sense there as well. As we do decent damage, but for a turret drone build, which is of course quite a bit lower than, yeah, let's say a striker or such. And especially what we lose versus that high-end version basically is that second minor attribute, where with the high ends especially, what I generally do is put a lot of crit chance and crit damage there. We don't need a lot of skill haste for third drone. Here as well, we don't have that much skill haste, and we have already pretty fast cooldowns. Even without any skill haste on usually the high-end one, you can still have like a 17-second turret instead of it being an 11-second turret. And that difference, I would much rather use up to get some crit chance, crit damage in there, as you can actually hit decently hard with the capacitor there as well. Here as well, we're going with the capacitor, definitely. It is one of the better tools in this case. But yeah, we're not kind of backing it up with some crit chance and crit damage the way we would there. But then, of course, what we get in return for that is the healing of Refactor. The healing of Refactor is actually pretty decent and can be used, especially, the thing is, this season, it being fragile armor, it's not that useful. But in seasons where we might see no regen again, I could see you running these, as especially in those seasons. I run quite a bit of combat medics in the past, and this kind of fits the role of a combat medic, but in a different way, in a different play style as well, which I actually quite enjoy. It is actually something new to the game that we haven't per se had in this form, although we've had similar things with talents in Division 1, so it's not a completely foreign idea. But and then the layout going out here is then, yeah, going combined arms together with the kinetic. And here especially as well, with the force multiplier, which does actually have an increased damage component to its perfect talent. Because in most cases with the backpack, we actually, the perfect talents there usually don't have more damage. They have longer duration usually, or shorter fall off, like with the gift, where you go from 4 to 3 seconds. But for instance, even perfect wicked versus normal wicked is just a longer duration. So generally, it doesn't matter with the backpack talents to go perfect, but in the case of combined arms, it does. Then as well, this lets us go for that 10 skill damage of this second piece of Hanayu, where if this was a Wyvern, of course, that would be just 8%. For the rest of it, what we have then is a pretty hardish hitting third drone build, but of course that kind of pales in comparison to some of the red builds. But it still is enough damage to be useful in a group and to make up for the health and armor scaling on the enemies, and then you kind of help out in other ways. And especially, I feel in seasons with no regen, this would be a good choice. Together with it's also in Summit, for instance, and stuff. I've used several of these forms. Then as well, of note is that the left side actually of Refactor, the cores are yellow. On the right side, it's all actually blue cores. So here the cores have been recored to a skill tier and a weapon damage tier. Here, of course, with Technician, we don't need it all 6 to be skill tiers because we'll get 1 from there. We could actually keep this a blue core and make it easier on ourselves and not even need to recore this one. And honestly, I would maybe go that route as well, as, yeah, 1 more red core doesn't add that much here. A blue core also wouldn't, though, as well. Another layout we can go with similar, the Refactor basically in the same form, although the glove also becoming a full yellow, and because we need demo to go with the artillery turret, going a mortar version of this. My preferred setup for that is going with a yellow sacrifice, if you can get it, and especially having the skill damage there. This can be skill damage status effect or skill damage skill haste. It wouldn't make too much of a big difference. And then together with that, with the strategic alignment, the name China Light backpack. And I like running it especially with the Stinger Hive as well, even though the Stinger doesn't get extra damage from the explosive damage bonuses, as well, it is an explosive skill. It does it does hit for yellow damages. It isn't actually affected by it as the sole explosive skill that doesn't. It is only affected by skill damage, but we have also a ton of skill damage here. And what this works out well as is especially putting it on their doors and such. And when the enemy spawns, which is also quite often when they might get a hit or such on some allies, when this lands underneath them, they'll get scattered, they'll get damaged by it as well, and that'll also heal your allies. And then the mortar is the big hitter. The difference in play-wise is that especially the third drone version will continuously do damage, so it's continuously providing healing, whereas going with basically anything else is gonna make it feel a little bit more bursty, basically. It comes in bursts. And the mortar, especially when it hits, it will heal everybody up to full, even if they're like full blue. But yeah, in between mortar shots, or like if a mortar shot in between misses or something, you're not doing any healing then. So that is a consideration to be made. And I feel both of those versions are perfectly fine to kind of run. Moving on to this one, which is an status effect version. So I wanted to make something that was kind of centered around, as the bonuses for Refactor also include some status effects. Could we make something effective that way? And it turns out that kind of, yeah, we can. Here we're kind of going in the layout of a foam eclipse. So we're going with a courier, a BTSU, and then 4-piece of Refactor. Anybody who's ever run a BTSU, courier foam eclipse will kind of know the layout. And we're kind of going with the same stats as well: status effects, skill haste mods, and kind of going then with, especially in my case here, you can't kind of see it, but yeah, a Stinger Hive, although actually it's in here, of course, as well. Stinger Hive and a Fire Cam. Kind of the same setup as a Fire Eclipse. And especially here, instead of the Scorpio, basically, I am going with a capacitor just to deal a little bit more personal damage. And what I've found that this works really well for is things like missions and such, especially if we're kind of just being, we're not going for the fastest, we're going more just for comfort, basically. The healing that this provides will take away quite a few places where, chip damage might happen quite a bit and people might get kind of, put into a corner and such. This actually allows you to, as long as you can, kind of catch things as they spawn and fire chem them and kind of keep them in place. This will keep at least that wave in place, heal people kind of back up. And I found actually this with bounty cheesing as one of the things that we quite often do. This to be actually pretty useful because that initial fight is usually where sometimes things can go wrong. Doesn't happen often, but let's say 1 in 10 fights, somebody might get overwhelmed on a corner or they might get hugged before they were ready for it. This kind of prevents that from being that big of an issue, and then of course kind of provides healing here and there, making it actually much more consistent. A little slower, but consistent. And consistency sometimes matters as well. So I've been kind of enjoying it for that, where especially we're fighting kind of one door and sending some chems there, and we're getting the courier to kind of spread it around for us. But also we just have enough charges, and together with the Stinger Hive as well in between, to kind of get enough hits in to keep everybody kind of topped off, and to provide a little bit of CC. Now this is, of course, it feels actually pretty frustrating to play as an Eclipse player, as I'm much more used to, like, I just set something on fire, it spreads to everybody on their death and kind of hits everybody. Trying to especially just rely on hitting enemies and then just having the courier kind of the creeping death talent to spread it around actually feels quite frustrating. So there is a downside of it like that, but once you kind of get used to it, it isn't too bad. And layout-wise, this is, of course, pretty simple. We're just the left side. This is all yellow core stuff anyway. We can just quickly put some status effects on there. The only piece we would need is the status effect knee pad. And I would actually kind of go this route, as, we don't have that much skill haste, but then the BTS2 is kind of solving that for us for the Hive, at least. And, of course, giving us an overcharge as well. Now, with this season's modifier, less of an issue, but without the modifier, for instance, this actually kind of does make a big difference because we can have the ability to overcharge for some of the more important fights if we kind of know we need a big fire going, or just to get our Hive back really quickly, because if the Hive is kind of running out of charges, I might just overcharge with this. Also, of course, giving a team-wide buff out to all my allies. We get a really big fire cam out of it, and then also the Hive comes back really quickly as it gets that very high skill haste when it's overcharged. And yeah, layout-wise, I've quite been enjoying this. This definitely, if you're kind of into fire eclipsing, I would definitely recommend trying this out. And this has actually made it into the recommended build list as well. This as well, having the backpack slot be this item. What we can do is, if for some reason we want to go with something else, we can. This is kind of like, I used to have a fire eclipse. That's actually what this replaced. A fire eclipse where I was using not the Eclipse backpack, which is of course not the recommended way to do a fire eclipse, but in that slot I basically had this same trio available. So we had either Creeping Death or Overclock or or perfect opportunistic, and yeah, all of them, the perfect version, this being the Hermano, and the setup on the other one, or the courier. And it actually does work out pretty well. So for that bounty choosing, actually, I think I went quite a bit with this overclock, and putting this down, of course, putting the Hermano, and then putting basically the hive in range of the enemies to hit them, but then also kind of in range enough for allies, because Hermano actually has a pretty big radius, giving them also skill haste, myself as well, for the fire cam. And then with that as well, giving everybody reload speed, which, you know, makes it even more consistent, which all helped kind of out. And I wasn't even running Creeping Death that much, because they're, of course, spawning just from one door. Overall, a setup I would definitely recommend trying out for the right player. If you're into fire camming and such, yeah, give this a try. Actually, I quite enjoyed my time with it. And yeah, it's going to stick around as a fixture that I've been using quite a bit. And let's move on to 1.09, the third of the refactors joining the build collection. And on this one, we're going, yeah, basically all red on everything, all red everything, always. And the idea behind it is, of course, very simple, kind of in the same style as a red FI, or maybe even a turret drone hybrid kind of style. We're leaning more towards getting some damage out of the capacitor, much more the red FI side, although especially going sacrifice here with a memento is, of course, very common for turret drone hybrids. And the reason especially for that is both apply both to the weapon and then also to our skills. As the memento, of course, that skill efficiency is very strong for the skills here. The weapon damage is good enough for here, but also we're providing a bonus basically to both ends, where the memento is kind of very nice for. And of course, glass doing the same here, going with the sacrifice, a full red sacrifice here as well, making it quite easy to kind of farm as we're going in all red. And yeah, basically, as Beyonce once said, if you like a gear set, put some red on it. And we're doing exactly that here. Going with red cores, of course, we do need to find pieces with crit chance, crit damage on basically all of these in the same style as the red FI, and then recording them to red. So these are harder pieces to get, as yeah, all of them need to be recorded, as yeah, the right side is blue as well. So, and we kind of need this layout. Of course, we don't want the chest or the backpack here. And then what we get here is that the capacitor can actually hit decently hard once the memento especially is charged up as well. And this in 4-man and such, or just, you know, running around in the open world, does enough healing with the turret and the drone that is actually worthwhile for the player and themselves and also for their teammates, as it does keep everybody kind of topped off. This is kind of in the same ballpark, in the same niche as the combat medics that I love so much. And this actually has replaced one of the combat medics in the build collection, as this character's slot where this used to live used to be the high-end obliterate version, high-end combat medic. I still have striker combat medic on main account, and also still a high-end glass version, which I kind of preferred always to the obliterate anyway. So we still have those, and then this has kind of joined them. They do kind of the similar niche, as especially they help. Just you can go with hard to earn and no regen on, for instance, Summit, or if they were available on the open world, without it costing too much, basically removing that hindrance of them. And we still have more than enough damage to kind of kill for ourselves, and then also our turret drone on top, giving that a little bit of that turret drone hybrid kind of gameplay together than with, yeah, kind of being the healing role. Although for myself, I quite much more prefer the combat medics. That might be also just, you know, I've played them so much, so I know them pretty well. But in there, we're playing it quite differently. Here, I'm just focusing on putting my skills out, trying to keep them active, shooting at the enemy. On a combat medic, I'm much more also keeping awareness of where my allies are and where I want to put my hive to kind of cover as many people as it can. And then, you know, where is everybody else so I can catch them with a chem if I need to. This one doesn't require that. And then, yeah, its healing is, of course, quite a bit less. With the Seasons modifier as well, this build is much more made as well with the Seasons modifier in mind, where, of course, with Overdrive and such, I can overcharge my skills and get a lot more damage out of them. Plus, we get also skill damage there. We get also weapon damage from that. And if multiple people in the team are kind of getting hit and I need to, you know, up the healing, I can just hit T, trigger Overdrive, and kind of get that going that way. And this has been actually pretty effective overall. One of the things is as well, actually, and I've been using that on, especially if there's a bunch of reds around, using the mechanical animal, because even without the capacitor, this build can hit hard enough to kill with this, especially if it's just a few reds, even 4-man scaled. And we are, of course, at 2 yellows with the mechanical animal specifically. We can take that all the way to 6 and overcharge, and even do it without the modifier on. But yeah, for the time being, I've been using this quite often with having that up, and then, yeah, here and there having the overcharge, and then especially with this season modifiers, working out pretty well. If this season actually had no regen, I would likely run this build quite a bit as kind of the combat medic of the group, kind of keeping everybody a little bit topped off. And this has been very effective. You could, of course, as well, and I've tried that here, going much more, leaning towards more the turret and drone and going with some yellow cores, more so than we do here with the red cores. Basically going this layout of an turret drone hybrid, which would mean that all of these refactor pieces would go yellow, or basically we keep 1 red in effect. That would be easiest on the chest, of course. And that would get us a little bit more turret drone damage and then drop our capacitor damage quite a bit. You could go either way, and both have actually been pretty effective, as I have ran it in that way as well, but I feel it lacks a little bit too much there in self-defense without the capacitor hitting as hard. But yeah, definitely one to, if you are kind of in that combat medic type of player and you kind of enjoy those already, this is definitely a different way to kind of get the same results. Healing up the team, doing your own damage, kind of having your own damage still be there, so you're just not just, you know, fiddling with your chem in the bag. You're just actually getting to do something. Yeah, let's move on to actually some of the other additions here. And going on to actually a new addition of a folder, and I'll be kind of adding to this folder and such as well. As we have here a conflict/dark zone recommended. This leads into this folder. I've added in a few builds already into this as well. And this is going to be the start of me also having a few conflict and /dark zone builds in there. They kind of overlap. They're not the same, honestly, conflict and dark zone builds. I might actually eventually even split them into separate folders, because you set up your crit chance, crit damage differently. But generally, of course, yeah, you would just change crit chance, crit damage for that. That's not that's not an impossible task, I would feel. This also is then a little bit of a reshuffle of character 1, kind of, as a few people noticed. As here as well, on 1.15 and 1.16, we have basically 2 builds that have been tagged as PvP in there. There always used to be actually some old DZ builds that I used to have, or well, a pair, 2 in general. If we actually go into these, as we'll go into 1.15 here, as the ones that I've definitely enjoyed quite a bit, and kind of I'm using as the layout for some of the other ones, here being 1.15. This is, of course, the cookie cutter capacitor setup for conflict that is very much popular now, with the Ninja Bag, 2-piece Umbra, and then Pika Rose, and then the other piece is kind of, yeah, up for debate. I've gone here with Walker Harris. Some people like going with Night Watcher. Some people like other things there, or just putting contractors, or maybe even Fox. This setup works pretty well in there. Umbra, of course, a setup where we can charge it up even out of combat. That's why it gets used as much. So you can just have the buff up from the start of the fight instead of, you know, after you're dead, which Striker ends up like that quite often. Then as well, 1.16 we have here. This is more of a high-end setup that I have there. Also in that folder, both of these are there. As usually the files in those folders are usually copies of here, and then also some additions of builds that I don't specifically have in the collection, but kind of want to highlight or just give the layout that you would have for certain setups of, like, for instance, going Bighorn with Striker or something like that. This then being an Unbreakable Adrenaline Rush setup, the high-end version, but just here then with the Pesty. And then, of course, there's a lot of other ways to set it up, and that's also why I want to have a folder, as, for instance, here we have it in the corner with a Fenris piece as well, and I, for instance, do want to add a Fenris one in there. I haven't yet, but I'll keep adding into those as well. Also, with all of these, at least for the ones that are specifically set up as they are now for conflict, I have them, although actually all of them in the folder are. I've actually have the conflict crit chance, crit damages here, as of course we do lose that 10 crit chance from the watch, the 20 crit damage. Would also you lose weapon damage and headshot damage and stuff. I'm not per se I don't care about those per se, because especially the crit chance, crit damage, of course, is a place where we do have the option to, basically go over, be in the 60 to 70 range in PvE sense, where then in conflict it becomes below the cap there. And then as well, we do want to balance these out always, because sometimes as well, I've seen people just go for that kind of like being close to 70 crit chance, so it becomes close to 60 on in conflict, but then they have like 70 crit damage without even more things, so that would even become 50 crit damage, and now you're kind of out of balance. You would be much better off being 40 crit chance and then something else, as long as, of course, the talents don't use it. And quite often in PvP, we don't use talents that are like Obliterate, which are very much crit dependent, although you could definitely use Obliterate in there. And yeah, the four that we have kind of in that folder are basically these two. So this was 1.15 and 1.16. And then together with that, I have a Lengmo variant, which is basically based on the capacitor version, of course, as we have it here, swapping in 2 pieces of Lengmo. This coming actually from the Pestilence build, the PvE Pestilence build, and keeping 1 blue core, 1 red core here. Although, of course, with the blue cores and the red cores, you can kind of play around with it. I've been quite enjoying this as well, and this could also work well as a basis for Iron Lung. You would need to change the crit chance, crit damages, as of course the Pestilence here. I am actually keeping it as a crit chance third stats. I need to actually add that here, I see now. But and that kind of lands us here with Iron Lung, of course. There we would want, or we have also 10 crit chance from a mod there where we don't have it on the Pestilence. So yeah, there are a few options there, and then as well, just a general high-end one here although actually I haven't added that. This is actually one that got removed. This used to be the old one on character one, an SMG setup. This one though was actually more set up for DZ. Not the biggest fan of it. We'll move it down the list as we'll add more and more in. But definitely one that can work and can be made to work, especially more so in the DZ. And then this one, for instance, stat-wise is kind of set up for the DZ. So I might in the future split these into 2 different folders. But for the time being, I've been conflicting myself and have been conflicted. So afflicted with confliction. So I've been meaning to add some in as dipping my toes back into there. And here to just highlight one other build that got changed. In the slot used to be the Marksman HeadHunter determined setup. That was with a Ninja Bike, Habsburg, Araldi, Aces, Breaking Point, and Hotshot, 1 piece. And then with the Ninja Bike, of course, getting the 2-piece brand bonuses on all of those and gear set bonuses. That setup, to me, just fails in comparison to Hotshot, 3-piece or 4-piece, preferably 4-piece in my case. I prefer those bonuses. But one of the setups that I want to kind of go for is one of the things that does have a different playstyle, and especially has been buffed severely in the last few seasons. And although actually in the last season didn't get touched because it didn't get a reload speed change actually, but 1886 of course, and it has been very popular. I've been meaning to have one. Of course, I have the HeadHunter tech tanks that I quite enjoy, especially with 1886, and nowadays as well with the changes of last season to the 1886, where it got a little bit more damage. You can actually run those without even needing grading on them. But then here I wanted to try out this setup, which has been popular for quite a while, going 2-piece Breaking Point, Fox's Prayer, 2-piece Zvia. One of the things we have with rifles is 2 pretty good brand bonuses, together with a really good name piece in the Fox's Prayer, of course. And taking it into this layout, we're just basically taking the 3-piece bonuses of Breaking Point, not the 4-piece. And because the full gear set bonuses are actually very lacking, Breaking Point has quite a few just practical issues in actually using it for output, not least of which is especially that you can't stack up the next buff basically while you're using up the current buff, meaning that you always have a pretty big gap in between the buff being up, and the buff is only up for 10 seconds. In that 10 seconds, like once in a while, you'll run into an enemy that is just hiding for 30 seconds and you'll just waste the buff. So it is just frustrating in how it kind of plays out in actual gameplay. That's also why we're just going for the minimal brand bonuses that we can get there from some rifle damage and also for some headshot. Although, as we kind of discussed in visualizing stats, this is basically the best we can get out of there, because we're already using Foxes, being Overlord, of course. We're using the 2-piece Zvia bonuses, so we already have basically all of the rifle damages that we could. Anything like Providences or a piece of Providence, a piece of Habsburg, trying to go like headshot or something, that would be actually less than the 25 we get from Breaking Point at the 2-piece. And rifle damage, and then in the 3-piece we of course get headshot damage. So that's kind of why this layout is set up like it is. One of the options we have here as well actually is to give up actually that headshot bonus that we have on the 3-piece of Breaking Point, and go with Eagle's Grasp instead and get the 30% weapon handling, because I feel quite often when you're 2 pieces invested into there, yeah, going that 3rd-piece Eagle or going that 3rd-piece Via is actually not that big of an investment at that point, and you gain a lot, of course. Then as well, we have the 2 damages sides of here. So this is again as well with Determined, and especially if you don't run Determined, you can actually push this up to a degree where, especially with high grading and this setup, you could actually reach the point where you could start on a purple. But that's actually the lacking thing of this versus a hotshot or especially MMR setups, is that most of those, if set up correctly, you can definitely start on a purple, because marksman rifles just hit harder in general. Even though this rifle is now as close as it can get to marksman rifles, it still isn't a marksman rifle. But we can actually reach a 5.5, which is below solo scaling for purple. But we can definitely get a red with this, and you kind of need to, or 2-shot even an elite with this, if 2 headshots happen. And then from the 2nd shot onwards, in this layout, we can just go from elite from there. And we cap out high enough that, yeah, we can even get some names and stuff with it. You are actually a little bit below what an LMG outcast, for instance, would be, and an LMG outcast named specifically would be. So you do need to watch out for that, but then you just, yeah, get the 2nd shot in there. But this works out pretty well, and especially what you gain on rifles is quick acquisition. Where with a marksman rifle, if you're running, you stop, you aim, you need to wait for a second before it becomes accurate, and then you fire. With a rifle, that aim is much faster, so or it becoming accurate is so much faster after stopping running. That is the big benefit of rifles, making it feel a lot more snappy, and especially if you can kind of snapshot, yeah, it's a pretty good setup. The other option as well that we have here is to have a shield on top as well, because we can use shields with rifles. So you do have just a little bit of protection. This build being full red, of course, we're not gaining that much from the shield, but at least you can take basically 2 hits more on the shield before taking 2 hits on the body and then going down. And then with the Eagle's Grasp, actually, we're still kind of keeping in that area. That's actually why I'm also kind of considering swapping this as the main build to be with the Eagle's Grasp, as we are definitely losing damage, and our cap as well is kind of dropping off a little bit, of course. But it isn't too terrible. We're still basically, because we're not actually getting a step up, because this 1st shot still needs to be either a 2-shot of a purple or elite, basically, or a 1-shot of a red. And then for the 2nd shot onward, it can already be an elite for this, at least solo scaling I'm talking here, of course, solo heroic scaling. But that would be the same for both of them. So we're not per se gaining too much there. So, and then here we have even more weapon handling, a faster reload, a much faster acquisition, as well as accuracy affects how quickly it becomes accurate. And then together with that, of course, as well, we have, yeah, that it sways a little less as well, even though rifles don't sway as much as MMRs to begin with. So I've been kind of enjoying this layout, and definitely if you're kind of into headhunting and you haven't maybe gotten this one yet, give this one a try. Getting the 2 Zuia pieces also isn't too hard. Those are red pieces, of course. They will require some optimization, so this isn't per se beginner friendly. Although you could likely find a piece that, or like find 3 out of 4 basically, and then, but likely you will need some optimization here, of course, as these are, for instance, yeah, free talentable made, and that is kind of the recommended way as well. You can also play actually around with the brand bonuses. And then here as well, with the Diamondback, actually, we can start on a purple to begin with, which is actually one of the ways I've been kind of going with it. Although you need the Diamondback, of course, also to target the purple or such, and that can sometimes be a little bit harder. But what I've been doing is actually just shooting at whatever it targets, to shotting them down, and then going from there with even the Diamondback. So yeah, quite an enjoyable build and well worth messing around with. And lastly, I wanted to actually showcase a thing that I recently made and finished off. It is actually already kind of living at the end of the build collection. It is all the way at the end there. And what that file specifically is my file of a skill mod tracking, skill mod tracker. As I've been meaning to have one of these, as on some of my characters, the skill mods aren't full, and then sometimes I pick one up and I go like, wait, do I need this for that other character over there, or did I need it? And of course, this is a common thing. There is already some out there of similar design. Of course, just, you know, what they are at their core is you could just do this on just a sheet of paper, of course, and just write everything down. But I've taken the work out of it and made it here, and also a little thing of it that I'm quite proud of, and that I got it working with it. It did take me a little bit. As of course, what I'll link to actually is the empty file. The empty file will live in the guides folder, actually, as I'll link it also in the skill guide that I have, that we actually do need to turn into videos at some point, as that one has been done for forever. But I'll link to this empty file. You wouldn't need to, as it says here, how to use copy to your own Google Drive, so you can edit it and then enter values into the yellow fields. If maxed, it will go green, and if not, it will go red, which is actually the part that took me quite a bit of work, and of course, just because I messed it up a little bit and then had to clean up, and yeah, it took forever. But let's say we have some mods on this character. We have a turret, a burn mod, which is at max as well, as we're kind of showing what the max are at the right side there. If you input a 5, for instance, there for character 1, let's say I have a 5, I have the 5 there, it will go green once you input it. If I have a 4.9 instead on character 2 and I input that, it goes red, which I'm as you can see, I'm very pleased with myself. It did take a little bit of work to set it up. It's actually not that hard, but I messed it up several dozen times in trying to get it to work together, especially as well when you copy paste or anything or move things around, that kind of gets in the way of stuff. Also, the way I've done it specifically is that the mods are the mod slots as they are shown in game. So actually, if we go into the game, so the mod order is the order as they are here. So if we go, for instance, into the Hive and go into its mods, if we actually scroll all the way down, we can see that when I shuffle between the mod slots, it's, you know, it's the first one, the second. So this is the second one. Oh, wait, this is the first one on the left. The second one is this one on the right, and this is the third one. So that's the order of them. So that's also there. And then, of course, all of the names and such are there, so that, yeah, you can just fill them all in. And this, I feel, is a tool that I needed for myself quite a bit, at least. I wanted to also kind of implement it in this way, just so we can easily see. As for instance, if I go to my own one here, yeah, it is kind of half filled in, and I still have to do character 4, but I can already very quickly see that actually this duration mod, for instance, up there, I don't have that on several of the characters. Not that they matter, of course. Now, of course, all of them are here, and some of them don't matter. So, for instance, there is stuff like scan range on the drone. Where's the drone? I'm trying to find it real quick. The drone, scan range. Yeah, because anytime you would have the scan range, for instance, you would, if you're using the drone that can do scan range, which is the tactician drone, the spotting drone, basically, you'll have sharpshooter, and you'll have very likely access to its mods, which are not included in here. None of the specialization mods are included in here because, of course, you just unlock them. But yeah, there's also normal mods of those, which are basically completely useless. They're still in this list. Same for the +1 mortar, which if you're using the mortar, you're using demo, and then you have the +2 from demo. So unless you're in that very brief window where you haven't fully leveled up, gone through the complete list of upgrading your specialization, which is, of course, a very brief period. But yeah, this as a tool, I feel, is actually pretty useful, and I'll be definitely using it myself. I'll link, of course, to it. You can just copy it to your own drive, start filling it in, keeping track of the skill mods, and then making it a lot easier to kind of transfer them around. Because at a glance from now on, I'll just keep this tab open for myself and just, if I have a few skill mods that are max, I can kind of look at this and go like, oh, that one I have already maxed out on all my characters, and then maybe decide to share it or just, throw it in the trash. And this was one that I've been meaning to make for a while. And the empty one, of course, starts as yellow. Any input that happens, it'll start to kind of show reds and greens. So I hope that will be useful to some. And thus we come to the end of this video. And I did want to, of course, as always with each season, give build collection updates. Although, of course, this one was very minimal, as in the end, there were more changes than this, definitely, to the build collection. Mostly it was Lexington's going in a lot of spots, as of course, Lexington is Lexingtoning away and is doing pretty powerful things. So it did get added to a lot of build pictures and such, and I shifted around some other builds here and there and just fixed up some mistakes here and there as well. But this was the major addition and changes, as especially refractors. A few refractors came in, and that also meant that a few other builds kind of vacated some spots for them. They, of course, those build pictures are still at the very bottom of the build collection. They are the X builds. They start with an X instead of a number. Those are builds that used to exist, basically, and or used to be part of the collection and no longer are. Several of the last ones in those lines are some of the ones that we removed recently. That kind of then together with some of the conflict builds coming in, as I did want to have a few spots for some conflict builds, and I might actually expand that still as well to one more even. So likely I'll shuffle some stuff around to make some spot on character 1 for that, together with that folder coming in for it as well, as I'll kind of play around in that as well, and any build that I kind of like, because a bunch of them will likely live in my stash, and I'll just grab them as needed or as I want to play around with them. But I'll definitely make build pictures out of them and add them to the conflict/dark zone folder. And of course, just one minor highlighted build there of one of the HeadHunters swapping out. And of course, the tool for the skill mod tracker. As I find myself finding that very useful, so I was wanting to share the news on that one, and maybe it'll help others out as well. But for now, thank you for joining me. For our next future videos, we're actually going to go into a debate item that has been going on, and here and there has been kind of plopping up. I've been forgetting about it, as honestly, the core of this happened quite a while ago, more than a year and a half ago, of DPS and what it should be at 0. At 0 time, what should DPS be? What I'm going to say is that it's 0. At 0, it should be 0, and there is nothing else that could actually work, is my opinion on that. I've debated this point as well, and kind of, put it to rest here and there, although, it's been creeping up again, so I kind of want to address it again, and do so better than I have done in the past, as I feel, by actually going through the debates. And that's also sometimes the point of discussion. You sometimes learn actually, oh, okay, this is because of this. I couldn't explain it yet. I understood it, but how to best explain it. So I feel I have those tools now, so we'll go into that. So kind of math-heavy debates, kind of theoretical kind of piece. Then as well, I do want to make things and stuff coming up, and the next build showcase will actually be Refactor. As we saw the trio there, they will actually likely feature prominently in that. Should be no surprise. So I hope you join me for those. If you did enjoy this video, please do any and all of the algorithm things down below. It does help out, so I'll do that little bit of shilling here. And I hope to catch you in the future. And as always, have a good night.